Welcome to the K-12 Change Equation podcast. I'm Dr. Layla Newland. I'm excited to share that Dr. Mike Lebelfeld, who was featured in one of our early episodes, will be joining Mort as a co-host for a few upcoming episodes. Stay tuned for some great conversations and fresh ideas as we continue to explore the exciting world of K-12 education change.
Hi, I'm Mort Sherman. Welcome to the Change Equation with Education Elements. I had the honor of talking to Karen Molinar today, who's the superintendent in Fort Worth. Our colleague, Layla Newland, is not able to join us today. She has something come up at the last minute. So I have the honor of talking specifically and as a singular focus with Karen. So Karen, usually we do this like elaborate introduction to the superintendent or to whomever we're interviewing, but you're so fascinating. Your district is just amazing to me. I'm just really pleased to see you smiling because I spent the morning looking at the news out of Fort Worth. And I'm going to start by having you tell us a little bit about your district, then a little bit about yourself. And then I got to warn you, I'm going to ask a question like, why are you doing this? And good for you and good for the children and the families in Fort Worth. But there's so much going on. So let's hear first a little bit about your district.
Sure. So Fort Worth Independent School District is the largest school district in Tarrant County. The city of Fort Worth just was named top 10 largest city in the United States. We serve around 73,000 students. However, we are experiencing a decline in enrollment, which is probably what you're seeing a lot in the news, as well as struggling since COVID, since the pandemic, of rebounding our academic achievement scores, especially in the area of literacy and math, of course. So a lot of focus on us as a district just because of how large our city, how fast our city is growing, but how we're decreasing enrollment. We also, Fort Worth is experiencing a lot of charter schools coming in, charter networks coming in. That is also impacting the decline in our enrollment. But I truly believe what we're doing as a district, we need to improve scores to increase our enrollment as well. So we're getting a lot of attention around Texas as well. We have one campus that triggered in 2023 the possibility of Texas Education Agency doing a state takeover during this time.
Karen, could you clarify that? Because I understand how Texas works and how TEA and TAS and all the involvement is, but that 5-year trigger, I saw Governor Abbott actually had a comment about that as well. So I don't know if you had first named with him, but certainly the state has its eye on Fort Worth. Would you want to talk about that 5-year trigger?
Sure. So under statute, when you have a campus that has received an unacceptable rating with 5 years in a row, the state is required to make a decision of the entire district. It can cause what we call it's a trigger for us, the statute. This particular campus, we actually put under a partnership with Texas Wesleyan, which is an 1882 partnership. So they are actually no longer under what we call our umbrella. They're under our partnership umbrella. But because the state of Texas, we had districts join together in a lawsuit against Texas Education Agency for the 2023 results. And there was a pause on accountability ratings at that time. So this campus during 2023 still was, even though it was under the partnership, it still received the unacceptable rating for the 5 years. 2024 ratings have not been released yet because that's a separate lawsuit, which we're not a part of the 2024 lawsuit. However, those 2024 ratings have not been released, but that campus actually got out of the unacceptable rating last year. However, the commissioner is still required to make a decision for the 2023 ratings since they were just released in April. So the decision is there's 3 points. He can affirm the school closure because it's already been closed, technically, that campus. It's a 6th grade center that we merged into a 7 and 8 school, feeder school. So that school number's already closed. So he can affirm the closure and he can remove me as the superintendent and our entire 9 trustees, our school board, and appoint a board of managers and a new superintendent, or he can keep me in place and just remove the board trustees and put a board of managers in place. So there's 3 options that he will need to make a decision in around the August timeframe.
Karen, so when you talked about one of the options that the governor has or that might happen by August, you talked about removal of the superintendent and others, but you just started there. Could you talk a little bit about your history at Fort Worth? I think you're just appointed in May, right, as superintendent? So a little bit about you.
Yeah, so March I was official. I've actually been with the district 26 years. I was recruited to be a teacher here. Born and raised Delaware, went to school in Maryland, recruited me to come and teach in Fort Worth, picked up and moved, and have worked my way through our great system here, teacher, assistant principal, into central administration, different roles, and was deputy superintendent. I did an interim between the last superintendent and the one prior during her 21-day waiting period. In October, the prior superintendent left. I was interim and then named officially in March. So my role as superintendent has only been around 3 months. 3 months in a week, maybe. So yes.
And you're still smiling, and you could deliver this message about the change that's needed with what I'm seeing in your face and hearing in your voice with optimism. And can you talk a little bit about, through the lens that you have this experience, which is really remarkable in one district, and this plan that you have to bring back students using improved instruction, improved test scores? I don't know if I had the words correct, but I saw when I read some work about what I thought was very impressive. Your idea was, how do we improve the school district so we increase numbers and we make sure that Fort Worth doesn't lose more? Can you talk about that plan that you're thinking about?
So, for me, I'm an instructional leader. The work on the campuses down to the classroom is really my passion. That's where, if you watch our board meetings, I do a superintendent report every board meeting around instruction, what we're changing. When I took on the role as the interim and was really, one of the for me, the non-negotiables was something has to change. I can't sit as an interim and not make changes immediately. Looking at that, it was like how we're utilizing our adults, that we're centralized. How do we put them back in front of students for additional support? The other part was really looking at our instructional delivery, going and looking at through a teacher lens, because to me, that's important. Like, what are we putting in front of the teachers to have teachers put a product and instructional delivery in front of students? And what I saw was, especially, and you talk to educators all across the country, it's hard right now to retain our teachers and then recruit teachers who have experience. We're in that same situation as across the nation of trying to find people who want to be teachers and then that they're trained. So when I looked at our curriculum framework around literacy and math, it was really just an outline. My teachers were spending more time planning a lesson, and then those lessons you could not guarantee were aligned academically to the state standards and the expectations of the rigor of those standards. So our students were really receiving instructional delivery, no fault of the teacher, below their grade level, and really not unpacking what does that standard and that TEAC say. So during Christmas break, I pretended I was a second grade teacher, and I second grade self-contained teacher, tried to plan an instructional day. And it was frustrating, very time consuming, and it was real trying to find resources versus really honing in on my craft of how would I deliver this instruction in a tier 1 setting for all students, a tier 2 to intervene, and then of course our tier 3 very small group one-on-one intervention time. Then I immediately said we have to rewrite our entire curriculum framework. And we have high quality instructional materials that are approved by the state, but our teachers were having to hunt and peck what from those materials to use. And then there was no actually checks and balances. They were using that instructional material. They could have been going off the internet. And we know there's a lots of internet sites that are very famous that people get paid to pull worksheets off that aren't state aligned to our standards. So that became really like, what do we need to improve? One, that's how I'm retaining my teachers, how I can recruit and really train my new teachers, but then guarantee that every classroom has high quality instructional delivery that's aligned to a state standard as well. And then when I think about my principals and assistant principals, I was asking them to monitor instruction that could look different in every single classroom. I'm not talking grade level. Depending on the grade level, whether it was a ninth grade classroom, sixth grade, or first grade classroom, it could have been different because there was not a standard district-wide that we were following at that point.
You know, I hope the teachers in Fort Worth are standing up and applauding you. I come out of a generation where they're trying to create the CAI, computer-assisted instruction, teacher-proof materials, and you said just the opposite, if I'm hearing you correctly. You said we need to honor our teachers, honor their ability to differentiate in the classroom, respect them, and support them. Is that accurate? Is that the approach you're taking?
I want to support them with their instructional delivery, not creating a lesson plan, not guessing if this resource is aligned, what resource to use. I'm going to give that to you, and I'm giving you an outline. I'm giving you a shell of even slide decks, anchor charts, and then you adjust them according to the needs of your students. But let me take that off of your shoulders. Instead of taking 2, 3, 4 hours to write a lesson plan and find the materials, I'm giving that to you. Now take that time, and how do you want to deliver that to your students? And really thinking about your students in your classroom, what type of learning styles and needs do you need to make sure they're receiving that instruction?
In order to make that important shift that you just talked about, you also talked about moving the instructional coaches or the support staff for the teachers and providing more opportunity for them to make the decisions. What support? I'm not clear about what you're doing to provide support, which is sounding like a significant shift and a great positive shift towards ownership and enabling professional behavior by the teachers. But they still need support to try to figure out, because they can't possibly understand how to make appropriate changes for all their kids. So I'm curious what you're doing for the teacher level support for them to make those decisions.
So in the fall, once I became interim, really took stock of what were we doing with our campus instructional coaches. And that, of course, is when we're working with our adults. Their sole really job description was to work in professional learning communities, doing PLC work, also doing some planning and working with teachers. So this is a model across the nation that we use, and a model in Fort Worth that we've had for years. But when we talk about academic return on investment, I'm talking about 150 support personnel in a district our size that for years we're working with adults, but we're not seeing our scores improve. So to me, that's a disconnect. We're not seeing that type of investment of our fund working for students. So I immediately shifted them to 2 to 3 days a week. They had to go into targeted campuses and work with targeted groups of students according to our middle of the year data that we use for our MAP testing. And we started tracking what standards they were working on according to the student data, how much time they were spending with them. And then the other 2 days a week, 2.5 days a week, they would continue to do the professional learning communities. We immediately, within 2-3 months, looking at cohort data, saw a 7% growth with students who were receiving that small group intervention over students who did not receive that small group intervention. So we decided for the 25-26 school year, we took all of those campus instructional coaches and we redesigned their job description. Now they're called demonstration teachers. So they actually every elementary campus will have a literacy demonstration teacher, every middle school and high school will have a literacy and a math demonstration teacher. Half of the time, every day, for half of the day, they have a group of students there. And we are targeted which students, of course, we're picking our tier 3 students, that they will instruct in literacy in elementary and then literacy or math in middle school or high school. With that, there also are what we call our lab classroom models. As we're redesigning our curriculum framework, they will have teachers come in and actually watch them teach, utilizing our new curriculum framework, the resources to watch how it can be done by a master teacher that has been selected by the district on their campus with students that look like the students on their campus. And then the other half of the day, they'll continue to work and they can go in and do modeling for teachers in their classroom or work with PLCs. This also changed their category from a professional employee to a teacher because they're teaching half-time under, of course, state statute for a definition. So these demonstration teachers are actually eligible for our teacher incentive allotment to be able, if they grow their students more than a year's growth, they're eligible for addition compensation as well. So you're taking professionals who are supposed to be your master teachers, you're putting them half day, every day in front of our neediest students on that campus in a targeted grade level, depending on that campus's data. But then you're also modeling for the teachers how our new framework is working. And let's be honest, everything's not going to work how we planned it and wrote it. So then our curriculum people go in and say, yeah, that's not working. Our demonstration teacher gives feedback. Look, this lesson was not as strong. This anchor chart, we need to add this. So they're going to be able to give feedback. And so we can also use that to become better and continuously improve our curriculum framework we're rewriting.
So the theme of this podcast is the change equation. And we know it's not a formula or an algorithm. Yet what you've just described is a really essential piece that we're hearing from superintendents and other instructional leaders across the country is engagement of the teachers. It's respecting the professions so that they have a voice and there's agency to their work. So I'm curious, I'm not sure I heard this from you, but I think I did. This idea of engaging those teachers in actually making the change in the model and giving feedback to continue, like a feedback loop about the model.
Yes, definitely. But the most important part is getting their feedback, getting the buy-in, because you're having someone on their campus actually live it and model it for them as well. Because it doesn't matter when you're doing something different. You could have been teaching 5, 10, 15 years. If it's something new, there's always this little first level of not being comfortable. So having that person on your campus down the hall that is also modeling that and seeing how they do it gives everyone that support campus in addition. But the key to any successful initiative or project, let's be honest, is consistency of the implementation. So I'm not naive. The big part with a district our size and from what we've been going through the last few years is going to be maintaining the non-negotiable of implementation, that we're all implementing the new framework with the materials that we have adopted that are aligned to the state, and that we're consistent in that implementation. So even with this, I think it's great what we're getting ready to do. I think it's a game changer for our kids. There still has to be the consistent implementation and the monitoring of that.
So two things. One of my favorite researchers comes out of the University of Texas years ago, a person named Susan Laux, who created the concern-based adoption model. And what you were just describing in the different stages matches exactly what I've followed all these years. And so thank you for reminding me the remarkable contributions of Texas educators to the rest of the country. The other question, and you can comment if you use CBAM model or a different model and make it explicit for the teachers. But the other is the student voice. I'm curious whether or not going through these changes, whether or not, I worked with Ron Ferguson for years and the 7 C's and the idea of giving students the voice. And sometimes what they say is very different than what the teachers believe is going on. So I'm curious, and I see a smile on your face, which means the answer must be yes. So tell me about student engagement with all these changes.
So we're actually implementing more student and parent voice, because parent to me is very important as well. And I don't like to call it engagement. I like to call it partnership, because to me,
Good.
parent is very important, because we're partners in this journey, and they know their students better than we know them, honestly. It's just, we have them at a different point of the day and it looks different. It's in a different structure, right? So for us, we adopted a district strategic plan in January. This is the first time in almost 10 years that we've had a strategic plan with goals, anchors, priorities, and action steps. Part of that is having student voice embedded through our student surveys, but then also during student observations and real-time class visits. We're really talking to our students and how they're engaging in the instructional delivery. So 25-26 school year, we'll start rolling that out with our students, but then also with our parents. I'm encouraging and increasing the transparency of what's happening on our campuses, in our classrooms, with individual students' academic growth to our parents. We incorporated this past now school year, a parent-teacher conference, district-wide parent-teacher conference day. We've never had one of those in our district, because we always, we come up with our own obstacles, the size of our district, time. And so we took one of our professional development days, and we did a district-wide parent-teacher conference day. And it got so much, overwhelmingly, and there's still, one day is not enough time to reach all of our parents. So we're actually going to do a fall one next year and a spring one, to really, I want our parents to be able to know what's happening in the classroom, but then the students share what's happening. Our high schools did an amazing job, where our high school and our middle schools had our students in the parent-teacher conference sharing what they see, what they're learning. And like what you're saying, Mort, sometimes there is that disconnect. So in the feedback we asked our parents to give us feedback after the conferences. We saw some of that feedback. It would have been great if they would have taken the time to ask my student, if my child, how is it working for them in class, or this is what I need to be able to be a better learner in class. But then also, can we start with some positives and not just go into what they need to work on? And that's, of course, your heart side, because every parent, they give us the best they have, right? They don't keep one at home and give us the other one. And so when we come onto the campus, it's like, tell me something positive. There has to be something good happening. And so we were also working on that customer service between central to campus, campus to parents.
So Karen, across the country, I'm sure you talk with colleagues, not just in Texas, but across the country, we're hearing something that you're too big to say it's a microcosm, so it's a large example. Budget deficits, whether it's the ESSER funding or just the tight state budgets and federal funding. And you're experiencing that in Fort Worth. Do you have a plan to address that? And does it include what you called your partners, the teachers, the students, the parents, to make those decisions about what you're going to do with the budget deficit?
Yeah, we adopted a deficit budget like many other districts around the country. And you're really hoping legislation, once everything, is now finalized and we start to do our run of our numbers, that we'll get some relief from that. But what's more important to me is now taking the time to see what is working, so we can increase those initiatives or increase that resource. And then taking this time to say, we're not getting any academic return. We need to stop doing this. What contracts do we need to pause? What positions do we see that are not impacting students? And that was a big one. We took the campus instructional coaches and some of our centralized content coaches and moved them to the demonstration teachers. Because if you're not working directly with kids, how can we ever measure really how you're impacting our student achievement? And so when we saw that already making some gains, we did the big shift. Now, next year, if we don't see that's really working, we have to make some hard decisions. It's just, all of our payroll is about 86% of our budget is payroll. So when we have to look at really making a deficit up, we have to look at people. And that's why I said I need to make this shift where everyone's working with kids. And it's almost like we got to earn our pay. Like how are we giving back to the district? Then we know there is that cycle. Once we start increasing our scores, our families that have gone to charter will start believing back in us, and they'll want to be part of a system that shows accelerated growth, brings students back, which brings revenue back. The other part is attendance. We are still recovering from that COVID world where school became optional. And there was just a little bit of a expectation. Like if we didn't go to school that day, it's okay. We can make it up here. We can, turn my work in late. And so next year in Fort Worth ISD, there's a huge focus on you're coming to school every day. And that does help our revenue as well, ADA, because in Texas, that's how we're funded. But what's more important to me, if you're not in school, you're not learning. So I'm being held accountable to academic growth. But when I have students who are missing 10, 11, 12 or more school days, it's hard to, hold them accountable for academic growth as well. So how do we switch this mindset that school is not optional any longer?
Yeah, when I was a year ago, before I retired from ASA, the School Superintendents Association, we began to hear across the country this question of attendance and kind of related, but discipline, but more about attendance. And did, huge research with, then we ended up at the end of the day with a firm grasp of the obvious, which is, you could do all the constraints and the incentives, but it comes down to what you've talked about today. Is there good instruction going on in the classroom? Do the teachers care about the kids? Do we give them a reason for attending? So you could put those laws and restrictions and regulations, but I think you've hit the core of it. And I want to know if I'm, again, reading you correctly. Give them a reason to come to school. They want to enjoy being in the classroom. Am I reading you correctly?
Definitely. I mean, you can see that actually when you can use data and look at scores. Our biology scores, did a huge increase this year. And, when I go back and I drill down and I talk to the administrators, I'm like, okay, what happened in biology? Well, that's hands-on. The teachers are hands-on. They're very engaging. The kids are moving. They're talking. They're doing experiments. It's just a different interest level. And that creates kids wanting to come to school as well. So you're exactly right. Kids want to, no one says like, I can't wait to get the English. I'm not saying there's some kids. I was that kid. I can't wait to get the English class today, because I'm really into this novel, but that's not the majority of our kids, right? It's the school experience, and Commissioner Morath said it. I was in a training with him on Tuesday morning, and he said it best last Tuesday. Parents and students experience a campus. They don't experience a district. And really our students experience a classroom. They don't experience a district. So every classroom experience has to be engaging. And then outside of that, what's the campus offering? What fine arts, athletics, club? What does their after? I have over 70 after school sites around our district, 70. So you're talking, almost half of our schools have a Fort Worth after school site attached to it. And that means I want my kids to stay even longer and engage and get, enrichment activities. That's why kids come to school. That's what they remember. When they talk about their school, they don't talk about necessarily their reading class. They talk about, I was on the football team. I played in the band. I was in the chess club. That's what they remember. And that's what they share with us.
Yeah, Dan Pink in his book Drive, which I use on our Superintendent Alexandria, talks about the intrinsic versus the extrinsic motivation. Like, why do you wake up and go to church on Sunday? Because it's good for you. You want to do it. Or why do you play golf instead of going to church? Because it's your religion. It's good for you. You want to do it. And you've hit upon that same thing. It's like after school or being part of the total fabric of education and learning, that intrinsic piece really brings kids to school. I want to shift to two more questions, or two big questions before we end. And by the way, you are just terrific to talk to. I'm going to see if we could talk to you again. I'm just so impressed So this question about your background, literacy, which you've mentioned a couple times today, early learning, I'm sure you've watched Mississippi and some of the other states across the country that put in the science of reading and had a significant improvement. I'm wondering whether or not you've also looked at that part of the instruction, but for all grade levels, but particularly the early years.
Sure. So my background is elementary, actually huge early learning, especially around reading. The college I went to was known for building teachers. That's what they did. They didn't teach us, they built us to be teachers, especially in the area of literacy. And one of the disconnects that what I found is in state of Texas, you're required to go through reading. It's called the Reading Academies. And it's required by the state, for our primary or elementary grade teachers. But what we have not done in our district, we did not take the science of reading, which is our Reading Academies, and then really implement it. What does this look like with our curriculum frameworks, in our classroom, with our materials? We're asking our teachers to go through modules in isolation. We're asking them to do something we don't want our kids to do, right? Learn in isolation without implementing it and making a connection. And that's where I saw a disconnect as well. They're great academies. The reading academies in Texas, they're great. But we were like, do it out of compliance, check, but not really integrating and then making that connection for our teachers. And then holding ourselves accountable to the science of reading connections. That goes back to phonics, that phonics base. We're adding in a whole nother component with it, adding in K2, even K3, a really heavy phonics component to get back to how do we teach kids to learn? How do we teach kids to read so then they can read to learn? And really taking and stepping that up. And then, of course, I am looking at models. I have a meeting coming up with some people who worked in Mississippi to really worked around that initiative to talk to them, because I truly believe there's parts that I can add in that we're missing here, in addition to that. So we study school models. That's in our district strategic plan, is looking at different school models to make sure we're not staying stagnant and we're continuously looking at other districts in the state as well as across the nation to say, what are they doing to move academics?
So I don't want to push too hard in this, but Texas is usually one of 3 or 4 states that kind of controls the acquisition of textbooks because you're so large: California, New York, Texas. And again, I grew up as a superintendent looking at basal readers, and many of them came out of Texas. And I didn't hear you mention basal readers as part of what you just described with. So I'm curious, your sense of that world and that structure, has that shifted over the years?
I think it's shifted over the years, not necessarily from the state, but maybe the requirements of districts of what they use. That has been a big leverage point that our state has done the last couple of years, and especially post-COVID, of really putting in state adopted resources that are more the traditional, what we call the basal readers, and going back to a lot more alignment to the standards. We currently, our reading program we utilize is Amplify, which was introduced by the state after COVID. So we have that district-wide. We are adopting this coming school year Bluebonnet Math, which is definitely our state's adopted material. And then there's also, we talked just a couple minutes ago about deficit budgets. Well, the state gives you definitely more funding opportunities when you choose to purchase their resources. When we utilize their high quality instructional materials, or HQIM, then we get additional funding assistance by adopting those materials. If it's a good resource, then it's my responsibility to put it in front of students, and it's my responsibility as a superintendent to take advantage of the funding source. I have to think of it both ways. Right now, they have great resources out. That definitely is what our students need. So I'm taking advantage of those resources and the funding and putting those in front of our students, definitely. And you're going to see a lot more of that traditional phonics come back, the readers come back, alignment to teachers not picking the text from their options, but all of us being on those same pages.
So, Karen, I want to end by talking about students. You mentioned the impact of COVID and the residual effect on that with attendance and the residual effect, I guess, on learning in general. Across the country, we're certainly talking about that. We're also seeing the impact of technology and AI on learning and families. We talked with the instructional coach or so, whatever it was in Aldine, Texas. And I'm just curious if you're seeing changes in the learners in Fort Worth and in the years you've been there, and how you approach them.
Definitely see the changes. Very technology heavy based, but I also take responsibility of that. That's something we had to do during COVID. We did one-to-one devices. We always had one-to-one, not always, but before that we had one-to-one in high school. Then of course, during COVID, we had to go elementary, middle. So everyone has one-to-one. But now I think it's our responsibility, especially when we talk about those foundational years, to limit the technology in the classroom. All of our tier 2, tier 3 resources became very technology software based as well. So our students were really being turned over to technology to intervene, which we all know the best intervention is really small group or even that one-on-one to be able to see where that learner is struggling. Not an easy thing to do. It's definitely easier to put everybody on a software program as a resource. But I think it's our time now to say we had to do it then, but that doesn't mean we keep doing it. But then how do you balance it with not causing our students who are progressing into middle school and high school with losing some of the opportunities that technology does bring? So we're balancing that right now with really going back to our elementary grades and saying how much technology do we want to utilize. But remember, our state also went to assessing our students all online. So you have to expose them online. So we have a lot of people who push back. They're like, you shouldn't have any computers in elementary. Well, that's not realistic because they're going to test online. You can't say a third grader or an 8-year-old, I'm not allowing you to have technology in your hand, but you have to be held accountable to a reading and math test online and not have any type of experience or interaction. But then I think about AI. They score our students' open-ended responses, especially our EOCs in English for our high school, English 1, English 2, and others, using AI. So for us to act like AI is not here when that's how we're being scored, that's not being responsible either to our students and their academic progress. Then I went to a technology conference that we hosted in our district this fall. And the speaker, he really put it in perspective when he was talking about when you don't teach AI properly, especially in your high schools, what you're doing is you're already limiting their opportunities, college applications, workforce, because there's a district across town that is allowing AI responsibly and teaching it how to build compositions, how to build and use it for applications appropriately. I'm not cheating, but how do I get a writer? How do I structure something differently? And it really resonated with me. I cannot act like it's not here and it's not going to be used. It's not replacing people, but it can also give our students what they need to stay competitive. Not even give them a leg up, but stay competitive with other students around the nation that are competing with them.
You used one of my favorite words, which is balance and resonance. Resonated with you. I've written a lot about that, and what you've described is a little bit different than some other superintendents and districts that are taken across the country, where some are saying, "Hey, get all of that technology out of the classroom." Instead, if I were still in that seat, and I'm really happy that you are and I'm not, but if I were in that seat, I would use the word balance also. And I would say it's how you use a technology. It's about executive functioning, about decision making. It's about being a good citizen in this world which is evolving so quickly. So if you say no technology, you're doing a disservice to kids. And again, that's what I'm hearing from you. And I just want to make sure that that's a good read.
Yeah, that's exactly. You said it a lot quicker than I say it, but that's exactly what I'm saying. There has to be a balance. But I am a true believer in books. Like people are like, "Oh, you should get that," listen to it on your way to work. I still buy the book. I still turn the pages. I still highlight, take notes. That works for me. That's my style, right? But when I think about my young learners, like I need to give them that tangible. They need to learn that foundation in front of a teacher, manipulating letters, writing, learning to really be a great speaker, and then how to turn the pages of a book. A book is a story, a book is an adventure. And all of that will happen naturally because they're being exposed to technology every day outside of school. I don't have to give them the exposure to it as much as my older ones just need it in a different pathway. My little ones, I need to really just give them the foundation of like technology first began here. And once you have this foundation, it can take you many more places.
Excuse me. We end our discussions with the now what, so what segment. And sometimes I do a summary. Sometimes Layla Newland, when she's with us, does the summary. But I'm curious. I'm going to let you do the summary. What's next? What's the now what, so what for you in your district when you look forward? I'm hoping to a very long career as a superintendent. What are those big issues that are coming up that you would like to address?
For me, it's always going to be first academics. And so my now what is now we put in place what we've been designing. We put it in practice. For us, it's like putting a medical procedure in practice that we've been designing, and now we need to practice it and make sure it's right for our kids, and then tweak it as we need to go around. A diagnosis. So, and then the so what is our kids are going to grow, but the so what is also holding the line on the accountability of the implementation and the consistency. We cannot give up and abandon it 2-3 months in when we're taking a stack of papers away from someone who's always used them in their classroom, or a unit that they created 10 years ago that they've always used. And we have to think about our students. And if you have not been getting results, we're all getting on board. We're all going to do this. So really for me, the so what is my kids are going to grow. We know by just putting adults and more adults in front of them, working in a small group, being more intentional and focused, we already saw gains. And I cannot let any student not see a gain.
On behalf of the Fort Worth community and all of the partners in your learning, whether it's the students or the teachers or all the support staff, thank you. You are very impressive, and I hope they know how lucky they are to have you. You are articulate, on point, and I think a wonderful visionary, a great voice for educators today, and I wish you years of success. Thank you for being part of our program.
Thank you so much. I love this city, and if you don't love this city, you're not going to love our students. That's what I say. So
thank you.